Now let's talk about the difference between a handyman business and a general contracting business. Now, whether you're a home service pro trying to decide whether you should be a GC or a handyman, or trying to decide which one's better, or a real estate investor or homeowner who's trying to decide which one you should hire, or if you're a real estate investor trying to decide whether you should DIY work like a handyman, or if you should general contract it like a MIYer, a manage it yourselfer, this video is for you. And ultimately, I'm going to show you what I call the identity matrix. This is going to show you where you land on this quadrant, whether you're a big boss, a monk mode, a cash machine, or a grinder. But first, why the heck should you listen to me? Well, I've started and grown a $5 million general contracting company, La Raza Construction. I've also grown a $1 million handyman company, and I currently own $25 million in real estate holdings. But before we get into the quadrant, let's talk about the trade-offs you make between a handyman and a GC. Let's start with job size. As a handyman, you're going to be doing fast tasks. You'll generally be in and out within a day. You get hired to do an electrical repair or a water heater repair, a floor repair, in and out same day. You usually get paid at the end of the day. As a general contractor, you're doing longer multi-phase projects, managing multiple different contractors to come in and out of there. Client perception. This is a reality, how the client sees you. As a handyman, they're generally thinking this is a budget way to get the job done. Not saying it's true. I'm saying that's the way they perceive it, that it's flexible, that it's quick, in and out. As a GC, they're seeing a pro. They're seeing formal. They're seeing high cost. They expect to pay more when they hire a general contractor to come do the job. Legal requirements, what it takes to actually operate as a handyman or a general contractor. For a handyman, there's generally fewer licenses involved. In fact, most places don't have any licenses at all. Some municipalities, however, require almost the same licensing as a general contractor. Now, pretty much everywhere that I've been, a general contractor is required to have state licenses. They usually have to take a test. They have to pass the test. They have to provide other documents to prove that they know what they're doing, or at least know how to read a code book. These guys can go get permits. That's the expectation for a general contractor. Now, there have been municipalities like smaller cities or really towns that I've been in, counties, not really the town, where no licensing is required at all. But generally, that's not where you invest in real estate, places where there's not much going on. Now, overhead costs for the company. Handyman usually has smaller overhead costs. They have their tools, they have their truck, they might have some light insurance, like stuff you can get online. There's online companies that give general liability policies, but these guys will have workers' comp exemptions. Usually they don't have the full stack like a general contractor who has heavy insurance. They have a general liability policy. They might have an umbrella policy over the top of that. They will have workers' comp for all the subcontractors they're hiring. And usually they even have to require general liability and workers' comp or an exemption from the subs that they're hiring. Not only that, but they have heavier admin costs. Usually they have to have people in the office that are dealing with the admin, so they have a higher payroll. And then the office expense itself. The admin team usually goes to an office. They have to pay rent or a mortgage to that office. So not only that, but they have the utilities, they have the maintenance costs of the office itself. Now, this might ruffle a lot of feathers because somebody who has a handyman business, they're thinking, well, dude, I have a whole bunch of costs myself. What are you talking about? And yes, I get it. There are a lot of costs involved, and there are usually pretty tight margins, especially if a handyman has grown their business, which we're going to talk about in the identity matrix a little bit later. There are heavy costs, especially in construction. Construction is an industry that's been around for a long time, and industries that have been around for a long time usually have had the margins cut pretty thin because there are always people that'll come in and offer to do the same thing for a little bit less because maybe they're not going out and getting insurance. Maybe they're operating out of their basement instead of having an actual office. Maybe they're having family do their admin for less money than they'd have to pay somebody off the street. And so the margins have been cut super thin. So I hear you out there. I know that it's tough. All business is tough. And no matter what, whether you're a handyman, whether you're a general contractor, whether you're any business owner out there, I know it's tough, not trying to hurt anybody's feelings, but generally the difference between a handyman and a general contractor is a handyman by themselves probably has less overhead costs. With that being said, let's talk about the lifestyle impact. For a handyman, generally, they have more freedom. They get a call, they get to go do a job, and then they could leave at the end of the day. In fact, I know a lot of handyman businesses who they work on Monday through Thursday and they take Friday off. They take a long weekend. I'm not saying that to be derogatory towards their work ethic, because a lot of these guys work harder than anybody you know. I'm just saying they have the freedom and the flexibility to take some days off versus a general contractor where they have projects, usually multiple projects, and there's always things going on. There's customers on their back about getting the project done faster. There's subcontractors who are trying to get paid. There's subcontractors who need you to go check their work so they can get paid. It's almost like you always have to be on the clock. Once again, not saying as a handyman you're not grinding out there, but I'm saying that a general contractor usually has more responsibility that they need to tend to all the time. It's harder to have that little bit of freedom. There's more structure. The work type itself, handyman, physical labor. They're out there doing the work. As we're going to talk about later, they may have hired people to do the work. They might lead a crew who's doing the work. But if they're by themselves, they are out there doing the work themselves. A general contractor, on the other hand, is spending their time managing. They're trying to get other subcontractors to do the work. It is a different type of work that these two parties do. Job complexity. A handyman has a single scope. They get hired to do a job. Hey, I need my water heater repaired. I have an electrical repair that needs done. I have some floors that need fixed. I have a cabinet that needs fixed, or maybe a couple cabinets installed. I need to install the hardware in my bathroom. That's a single scope job. They come in, they have all the tools to get that single job done. They get in, they get out. Whereas a general contractor is managing multi-trades. They have multiple subcontractors that they're managing to do a job, and it's generally a longer-term job. It's not a job, it's a group of jobs, which becomes a project. They are project managers, managing multiple jobs inside of that project. You see the hierarchy here. You have a project. Inside of that project are multiple jobs. Job 1, job 2, job 3. I said 1 right there. Project, multiple jobs inside of that project. Inside of jobs are, of course, tasks. So a handyman is going to be here dealing with jobs and the tasks inside of those jobs, whereas a project manager or a general contractor is dealing with the project and all the jobs inside, and they're relying on the different subcontractors to deal with the tasks associated with each one of those jobs. That does bring up a different point here, a little bit outside of what we're talking about. There's almost a third group beside the handyman and the general contractor, and these are what I call an all-arounder, or you might refer to it as a remodeler. This is kind of like a handyman. They would be able to do similar things to what a handyman might do. You might hire them. They're usually a little bit cheaper. They're also not as good as a handyman, who should be amongst the best at each specific job. Whereas an all-arounder or a remodeler is somebody that you would hire that would do the work themselves, but they would do it across multiple jobs on the same project. So you might hire an all-arounder to come in, and they're going to do cabinets, they're going to do trim, they're going to do the butcher block countertops. They might even put in the floors and paint as well. You would hire them to do a grouping of jobs, a chunk of jobs on the same project. So it's not like a general contractor who manages people to do those jobs. An all-arounder is like a handyman who does a bunch of jobs. They're there for a little bit longer than a handyman. Handyman does a single job. All-arounder does multiple jobs. They might manage a crew or do the jobs themselves, whereas a general contractor manages all of the jobs on a given project. Now they're what I call skill set identity. A handyman is what you would think of more like a craftsman or a tradesman, whereas a general contractor, you would think more of like an operator, a project manager. Those are the names, the titles you might associate with each of those groups. Now, the financial structure, we alluded to this a little bit with the overhead costs and some of the other things that we talked about, but I'm going to get a little bit more granular about it right now. For a handyman, they're getting quick cash. They get a call, they go do a job, they get paid basically right away. That should be the expectation of a handyman. When they go do a job, they're basically getting paid right away. So they have access to quick cash. They might be charging at an hourly rate, or they might bid the small job that they went there to do that day. Like, oh, you need your water heater replaced or repaired. That's going to be $1,500. Or they might say, I'll do this at an hourly rate of $65 to maybe even $100 an hour, depending on how good they are, plus materials. A lot of times they'll mark up the materials by X%, or they'll just charge their hourly rate to go to the store to get it. So those are the two main options for a handyman. A bid for the job that they're going to go do that day. You'll generally pay them at the end of the day or soon after, or they're giving you an hourly rate, and we're not really going to talk about how to manage those things today, what I would prefer or not prefer. Next is the general contractor. They are going to have large invoices. They might have different checkpoints that they get paid by. I'm going to get paid after the mechanical, electrical, plumbing rough ends are done. That's going to be my first checkpoint to get paid. I'm going to get paid again when the floors, paint, and drywall is done. I'm going to get paid again when the trim and the tile and the cabinets are in. Just as examples, we actually have like different phases on how we break up jobs into checkpoints, whether it's for me as a real estate investor hiring a general contractor, or for me as a general contractor collecting money from somebody. We break it up into specific checkpoints. But for a general contractor, the pay is a lot slower. You have to put a lot more money out there before you get money back, because you have to pay the subcontractors who are coming there to do work. Because just think about it, like the handyman is going to go do a job, they're going to get paid for it right afterwards. Well, the general contractor is going to hire somebody to go do a job, and they're going to want to pay them right after, but they might have to wait until the next checkpoint to get their bigger chunk of cash from the client that hired them. So it's a different type of money management. Now, for a general contractor, the main two ways that you're going to pay them is either it's going to be by a bid, or it's going to be by what's called cost plus. So a bid is, I'm going to do this whole renovation. Here's the details of what that renovation looks like for $85,000. You agree to it. You agree to the checkpoints at which you pay them, and you pay them that amount, even if it took the general contractor $95,000 to complete the job, you're paying them $85,000 on a bid. Alternatively, if they only take $40,000 to do the $85,000 job, as long as the scope of work is complete, you can't really worry about what they made on the job. Whereas cost plus is more like, all right, I'm going to charge you what I had to pay somebody to do that work plus a markup. Usually a markup would be like 15 to maybe 25 or 30%. It'd probably be a little bit higher on homeowners jobs than it would be for an investor job. It's a whole like Costco type of thing. You know, a real estate investor ideally is giving these contractors multiple jobs, and so they don't have to spend as much on marketing, more like wholesale. Whereas with a homeowner, they usually charge a higher markup because they have to spend a lot of money to go find that client. And there's other things like customer service that you have to pay for. There's a heavier admin. It makes sense that a homeowner would get charged more than a real estate investor. It's more like B2B, business to business, instead of business to consumer. Now let's talk about stress. There's different stressors for each one of these groups. The handyman has literally physical fatigue. You've all heard this before. I'm not going to be able to do this my whole life because, my back's going to give out or whatever, which is reality. the body doesn't last forever. And these guys are thinking that, well, I can't physically do this all the time, or I'm physically tired because I'm doing job after job after job with my own two hands. Not only that, it's the phone attachment. I think this is the thing that's really difficult for a handyman, is the phone attachment, the attachment to marketing. Because yes, there is the freedom of, I get to do a job, then I can go do whatever I want to afterwards. I get paid for that job. I can take on another one if I want to, or if I don't want to, I can go do something else, work-life balance type of thing. Whereas the problem is that means that you have to be marketing constantly. Every time the phone rings, that is money in your pocket. That's a potential job that's going to put money in your pocket. So you kind of have to be tethered there, and that is a stressful thing. Whereas the general contractor, they have a different type of stress. Now, they do have the marketing stress. Of course, they're trying to pick up the next job, but once they pick up a job, as we've discussed, it's longer term. So they have their money set. They have a contract set for X amount of weeks or months in the future. They kind of can take a breath for a second on the marketing. Not saying they should, I'm just saying they can. But there is, because of the different type of work, managing people, managing these different jobs, managing relationships with customers and long-term customers. We're going to talk about that in a second. But there is a mental fatigue that happens. There is like a people stress, especially if you're like a introverted type of person, having to go out there and talk to people all day, because that is what a general contractor does. They're constantly working these different relationships. It can be very tiring. You're always balancing the, do I have enough work versus do I have enough subcontractors to do it? And that can be a really stressful thing. Not saying the handyman don't manage other people and manage relationships with customers, but on the general contracting side, they're longer term projects, which we're going to talk about here in just a second. But first, let's talk about scaling these businesses. With a handyman business, the real difficulty in scaling is finding smart work, finding smart labor, finding the type of guy that is like you are. You probably started and grew a successful company because you're very good at problem solving. You're very good at figuring out the thing that's broken and pulling something out of your deep bag of tricks that you've learned over the years on how to fix that problem, how to solve that problem. So finding somebody else that has that same set of skills is usually pretty tough, because a lot of times the guys who are really smart like that, are really good at problem solving and picking things up quickly, a lot of times they're starting their own handyman business. So it's hard to find the smart labor. A lot of times as they grow, they have to kind of manage the guys with it, and then it starts to become a financial issue, because now you have two guys on the job that should only take one, and you really need one there to make the kind of profit margins you need to make to have a successful company. Now with general contractors, the difficulty is finding strong management, finding strong leadership, because there's a lot of things to manage. Like we talked about, there's the subcontractors, there's the clients, there's the materials, the supplies, and you're trying to coordinate all these things. It takes a special type of mentality. It takes a special type of skill set, and that skill set is really hard to find. That's definitely difficulty I had when I was scaling my general contracting company. That it worked really well if I was managing the projects. If I was out there doing the thing, walking the projects, doing the inspections, I was going to get deals on supplies. I was going out there to recruit and meet subcontractors. But then when I asked other people to do that, well, it was really difficult to do because, like I said, the margins are tight. So to go hire somebody at a high rate that might be able to have those skills, well, that made my finances not work. So then you try to bring somebody in that you train up to do what you do, but they don't do it like you do it. And so it doesn't work at that size of business. It might have worked if you were just starting out, but you're not by the time you go to hire somebody. So those are the difficulties in scaling for each one of those companies. Both of them are hard to do. It's just kind of a different type of hard. Not sure if you're picking up the theme here, but it's all kind of hard. Nothing is easy. I know that a lot of gurus or whatever out there try to sell you the idea that there's like get rich quick or you can do this in a weekend. And I've even made videos like that to try to get people involved in something. But the reality is there's not a dang thing I've done in any sort of business. And I've done other businesses other than the ones that we're talking about today. It's all hard. You all have to grind to get to the next level. Money doesn't come easy. You got to earn it. Or you can just go get a job and go make money for somebody else. Your call. Now, finally, the client relationship. Now, this is a pretty important one. And this is a really enticing thing for the handyman business is they're in and they're out. They get a job, they give them a price or the hourly rate, and they get that job done, and they're in and out. It's usually a day or less for a handyman. That's great. You can actually be a hero there. You can solve somebody's problem. They're happy that you solved the problem. They pay you. You're on your way. They call you for the next one because you really impress them. Whereas with a general contracting business, it is a marriage. You start the project and you have to do a lot of discussion before the project ever even kicks off, before you even make your first dollar. You're doing a lot of work with this client, whether it's a homeowner client or a real estate investor. You still have to work out the scope of work, understand what their vision is, help inject some of your knowledge and your experience to help curate their vision. And then you start the project, and the project doesn't usually take weeks. It usually takes months, and it usually takes longer than you expected it to take because unknowns come up. They always come up. So it always pushes the project out. And you might think that you're communicating as well as you possibly could with the client, but they might be hearing something different than you think you're saying to them. And so a project that lasts that long ultimately is going to have some rocky patches. I mean, no relationship since the beginning of time ever just went smooth all the way through. There's always ups and downs. But the thing is, when you have ups and downs with your buddy, well, they've experienced the ups, so you already have a lot of trust built with them. But this client, well, they just met you. So when the downs happen, they think you're just trying to screw them. And then they start to develop a bad picture in their head of you. And that kind of filters everything else. It is a really difficult thing to get right. And quite honestly, I've never probably gotten it completely right. It's a very difficult thing to do. I'm also not really great at taking on homeowner jobs or even customer jobs at that. Most of the stuff that we do is internal because I guess I'm aware that I really suck at that, but maybe you're a lot better at it. But I imagine that no matter who you are, that marriage is a difficult thing to deal with. Now, the $1 million question: who makes more money, a general contractor or a handyman? Well, that depends. And that is where this quadrant comes into play. That's where the identity matrix comes into play. Now, here's how it works. You have on the x-axis, that's from left to right here, you have handyman or DIYer. If you're a DIYer trying to decide whether you want to do the work yourself or manage it yourself. All right, on the right to left, you have handyman or DIYer, and then you have general contractor or MIYer. You could be, depending on the things that we just talked about, you might be all the way over to the right on this scale. You might be a 100% general contractor, or you may be a 100% handyman or DIYer. You could also be somewhere in the middle. There were times in my career where I was general contracting, but sometimes I would go in and do some of the work myself so that way I could just get it to the next level. There was some kind of bottleneck that needed broken, and actually that is my business model now, where I have a handyman crew inside of my company, and when a bottleneck happens, I send them in to break the bottleneck. That way I can get back to subcontracting things out. In the perfect world, I would be 100% general contracting things. However, it's not a perfect world. I make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. I make a lot of mistakes. And so I have to send in my crew, break the bottleneck, move on to the next thing instead of waiting for somebody else to clean up the mess. Next, we have the y-axis here, where you have on the bottom, not saying it's worse or better, just that's how I set up this quadrant. You have a tactician. And then on the top, you have an operator. All right, so I've actually named each one of these quadrants. You have in the upper right, you have what I call the big boss. All right, this is somebody who is an operator, that's the y-axis, and they're a general contractor or an MI-wire. This is somebody who you would think of as like a real estate developer. They're like builders, right? They have figured out how to manage a bunch of subcontractors. They have a bunch of projects going on. They have systems in place. They have employees who know what they're doing. They have project managers who are managing these people. They have financial systems to collect. They have scope of work builders. They have ways that they are systematizing everything, that they are documenting everything. Hopefully they do, because I've certainly grown faster than my systems before, and then you're kind of like a chicken with your head cut off. Now, everything that I'm talking about right now is the best case scenario in each one of these quadrants. I will get to what happens when you do the dumb things that I've done and grown too fast or whatnot. All right, now we're still in the operator section here, but now let's go over to the left. A handyman, DIYer, who is an operator. All right, so everything that we've talked about basically up till now, except for I've alluded to this a couple times, has been a handyman working solo, or maybe having a couple guys under him that he manages to do that work. He or she, don't get mad at me here, I just naturally say that. But anyway, if they have figured out the systems, they have figured out how to operate, they have figured out how to work on their business instead of in their business, and they have an admin team, they have billing systems, scheduling systems, multiple handyman that is working underneath them. This also applies to like MEP businesses or really any trade. If they've figured that out, well, now they are what I call the cash machine, because this is a great business model. This is thinking like Mr. Handyman or like some of the other neighborly companies if you want to get outside of Handyman here, but they have multiple people. You probably don't even know who the owner is, or the owner is not going out there and doing the work anymore. They are managing a business. So it's really like, it depends what type of business you want to hire or what type of business you want to become. But I call it the cash machine because, like we talked about, you get fast cash. So there is constantly cash flowing in, and it's generally pretty profitable. At least from your top line, it's profitable. You might have some serious overhead expenses. Just let me explain that really quickly. You have your revenue. That's your top line. Let's say that's $100,000 a month. And then you have your costs of goods sold. That's what you have to pay to actually get that work done. Let's say that the cost to get that work done was $40,000. Now your gross revenue is $60,000, right? The $100,000 minus the $40,000. After your gross revenue, now you have your overhead, your office expenses, your insurance, all that crap. Now your overhead, depending on how good you are at being prudent about your business, I mean, it might be close to that $60,000 number. You know, you might only be profiting $5,000 at the end of the month. You know, this is your actual profit or net income, depending on how you call it. So a handyman business usually has a higher gross margin. The gross margin in this business would be 60%, right? The $60,000 over the $100,000. So out of $100,000 of revenue, $100,000 brought in by customers paying them, they get to keep $60,000 of that before their overhead. All right. The handyman business is really good with gross revenue, whereas a general contracting company, well, they have a lot of cost of goods sold. They have to pay all of the subcontractors, all the material. All right, so I really love the handyman as an operator. The cash machine is a great way to have short-term cash coming in all the time. But also, as a general contractor who is an operator, you're playing with big sums of money. So this $100,000 in revenue might be more like add a zero to it. You have $1 million in revenue, but you might be spending $800,000 to get it. So your gross margin is a lot less. You're only making $200,000 of gross revenue over $1 million totally brought in. And then your overhead expenses, like we talked about earlier, are much higher, and that scales. As your company scales, so does your overhead. That's the problem, is it's hard to break away. By break away, I mean that your gross revenue starts growing exponentially in comparison to your overhead. Basically, that's the crappy part of construction, is as you grow the revenue, everything kind of grows with it. I think it's a little bit better for a handyman business or a single trade business versus a general contracting business. But once again, big chunks of money. It depends who you want to be. Now let's move to the bottom of this y-axis, where we get into the tactician. And a lot of people might think of this as a bad thing, but it's not. It depends what you want in your business and in life, or if you're hiring people, what type of person you want to hire. And actually, I usually like hiring these type of people, especially the bottom left quadrant. The grinder is what I call him, not to be confused with the app. And the grinder, I said, well, you know them. You know the guy or the girl that busts their butt all day, every day. You know them as the tradesman, the craftsman, the one who is driving their truck. They got the tools, and they will work their butt off sun up to sundown every day. And that's how they make their living. It's great. Something to be proud of, for sure. And that might be the person you want. Like I said, I set up a quiz for you. You can take the quiz. You can decide what's most important to you. When you're done taking the quiz, it's like 12 questions. It will tell you where you sit on the identity matrix and what that really means for you if you want a little bit more detail. It's easy, linked in the description. I'm not even asking anybody for their email. I was just testing out making one of these quizzes, thought it was cool. And so try it out. Tell me what you think of it. Come back to the comments and say, I'm a grinder or a big boss or a monk mode, which is the next thing we need to talk about. There's a train going by. Sorry, I bought a house next to train tracks. Didn't realize it till after I bought it. So it's going to get a little loud, but I'm going to keep on talking. Monk mode is tactician on the y-axis, and it's general contractor on the x-axis. Now, I call this monk mode because this could be a phenomenal situation. And I know people who are in this situation a lot of times as a real estate investor. And I know it's weird to talk about real estate investors in the same vein that I'm talking about you tradesmen out there or you general contractors out there. But guys, listen, a real estate investment business, unless you're into some high financial stuff, is a construction company. I mean, that is the meat and potatoes of the business. You buy houses, so that does take like a sales side of it or a prospecting side of it to find these deals, underwrite these deals. You know, that is a little bit more white collar maybe. But then the meat of the thing is taking a crappy house and making it less crappy, or making a crappy house really nice, or making a okay house really nice. But the moving it from one side to the next, that's all construction. That's all forcing equity, forcing appreciation into the house by construction. That's how you do it. It is a construction company. That is what you'll spend 90%, 80%, maybe 70% of your time doing as a real estate investor. So that's why they're in the same vein. Monk mode. Like I said, I see this a lot with real estate investors, and these are people who don't take on too many jobs. They might only do one at a time. Maybe they do one flip at a time. Maybe they take on one customer job at a time, and they do it really well. They have their subcontractor relationships. They have the suppliers. They know who they're going to buy from. They probably have deals set up where it's delivered or whatever. Maybe they have clients that they work for multiple times. Maybe they have consistent clientele to where they don't really have to go out there and market. And honestly, when you get to that level, if you're a good manager and have good relationships with all these people, it gets really easy. So I call it monk mode because they can really have the Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week and still make great money. That's a great situation to be in. However, you might be watching YouTube for the same reasons I watch YouTube, because I'm never happy with what I'm doing and I always want to do more. No matter what, I have to move up the y-axis. I have to become an operator. It's got to be bigger and bigger and bigger. And, you know, that probably sounds cool, but the reality is the smarter ones are probably the tacticians who have put systems into place and have built relationships and just have it really easy. They coast and they can go do what they want to do. I don't know what's best because, like I said, I like to move up that scale. That's why I'm here. Now, one more thing for the monk mode people. I said, probably don't know them. You know, for the bottom left, the grinder, we said, you know who they are. For the monk mode people, you probably don't know who they are because they don't want you to know who they are because they don't want to be out there doing the thing. They just want to make their money, have their balance, and move on. So you probably don't know who they are. How about that? Now, that was talking about each one of these people in their best case scenario. That is if they have put systems into place, if they have built great relationships, if they have put all the things in place in their foundation that they need to. But that's not what happens a lot of times. You don't usually grow lock and step, you know. Isn't the right phrase? You know what I meant. You don't grow linearly. So as you're moving up, as you're growing, which I imagine most of you guys want to grow, you probably grow faster than you want to. Not than you want to, than you should. So you're taking on more than you're actually capable of handling right now, which is a classic model. I mean, think about Apple. They're doing updates all the time because they always give you crap that's not ready to go, knowing they're going to upgrade it later. All right, same kind of thing as you're growing a business. You're always kind of putting the cart before the horse. You're always going faster than you actually have the capabilities of handling, and then you figure out how to handle it. That means you don't have systems in place. Maybe you don't have the right amount of people. And so then you are the danger of all of this, which is what I call the scrambler, where you're always kind of like a chicken with your head cut off, running around. And I get it. I was also that way all the time. And I can't say that I've grown past that, because I want to grow. So sometimes you grow faster than you should. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I mean, you're probably sitting here watching YouTube because you're trying to figure out how to cash the checks that you've already written. And there is nothing wrong with that. That is how it works. I mean, that's how people grow. And just be aware of that. Don't get too far out over your skis, because that's when bad things happen. Guys, like I said, made a quiz where you can take it, you can see where you fit in that identity matrix. Also, if you're a real estate investor, it'd be a fun thing for you to do anyway. I do a lot of videos like this. I really focus on real estate investment. As you've probably heard me talk about throughout this video, I really focus on the fact that crap doesn't come easy. There are no easy answers. It's going to take work. But the great thing about real estate is that it is a sure path. All right. It might not be the easiest path. I don't know what the easiest path is. Maybe I would have done it if I would have known, but it is the surest thing. And that's what always has attracted me to real estate. I know that if I take these steps, that wealth is going to be at the other end of that tunnel. And I like the sure thing. I like the control all the way up. And when you learn construction, especially, you're really able to control yourself all the way up. You prevent yourself from getting out too far over your skis because you have skills to back it up when you inevitably do that. So why don't you watch some of my other videos and put some skills behind the things that you're trying to do, and hit me up in the comments. Thanks for watching.